Hey, Marilyn, it's just wild. The smart money out there is pricing the Fed to hold rates next month at like 68%. But then you see the news and it's pricing 55. Like, how does that even compute?
Oh, right. It's that gap we were talking about before Warsh's first press conference. And it's not just that, like you've got oil at $100, this massive forward descent fracture in the Fed itself, and then get this, a San Diego court just put a $50,000 a month price tag on municipal defiance, like a price.
Wow, 50 grand a month for defiance. That's intense. And the bond market, Bo, it's telling us something totally different, right? Like the current rate isn't enough to hold inflation. So both can't be right. What gives?
Exactly. And most of the coverage reads this as hawks versus doves, which frankly, it just isn't. It's variables versus boundaries. And the analysts, they can't see the gap, honestly, because they're watching each other, not the actual order book. It's so frustrating sometimes,
So it's like one contract, one threshold then. June 16th, right before the meeting opens. Below 0.62, the boundaries, they fold. Above 0.72, they hold. You'll know before the press conference even starts. That's a pretty clear signal, actually. Okay, so let me just anchor what's actually on the table here. We've got CPI at 3.8% year over year. That's the largest jump we've seen since 2023. PPI, Producer Price Index, at 6%, fastest pace since 2022. The 10-year Treasury, it moved 14 basis points in a single Friday session to 4.59. The 30 years at the cusp of its 2023 peak, and the 2-year is sitting at 4.07, which is like above the upper bound of the Fed's own target range. Ed Yardeni, and he said it plainly, the market is judging the current rate level insufficient to contain inflation. CME FedWatch is now pricing a December hike at over 38%. The 2026 cut, fully erased from the curve. All that, and the Fed is still... What's happening?
Right, and all of that, Marcus, makes the 68% hold pricing on Fed June 26, stranger, not less strange. You totally expect that contract to have repriced too, right? But it just didn't.
Because the contract then isn't about inflation, is it? It's about institutional architecture. Warsh was confirmed by the Senate on May 14th. June 16th, 17th, that's his first chaired meeting. The 68% then is the market saying a brand new chair does not break order at his first meeting, no matter what the data say. Is that kind of what you're seeing?
See, that's the framing I really want to push on, actually. The analysis out there, it just treats holding the boundary as if it's Warsh's choice, as if he decides on the morning of June 17th whether to perform decisiveness or, demonstrate continuity. But Marcus, look at what he inherited. Powell's last meeting was 8-4, 4 dissents, Murin and Waller voting to cut, 2 others objecting to the easing bias language. That's not a fracture you just walk in and reset, That's the structural state of the institution before Warsh even said a word, honestly.
Right, but the fracture cuts both ways though, doesn't it? I mean, a new chair who hikes panic style at his first meeting, that confirms the fracture. He validates the dissents. He signals that the institution is reactive to the data on the desk rather than to the actual, architecture.
Or, and this is what most of the analysis just won't say, the dissents were never about hawkish versus dovish. They were about a committee that no longer believes the rate path is the right instrument for the inflation they're seeing. Energy-driven CPI from a closed Strait of Hormuz? That isn't something a 25 basis point cut or hike addresses. Both moves are just theater on a stage where the actual mechanism is supply. Do you know what I mean?
Fair. Okay, so if neither a cut nor a hike actually does the work, then what's the bond market doing telling you the rate is insufficient? What's its point?
The bond market isn't telling the Fed to hike, Marcus. The bond market is doing the hiking. That's the part I really want to land here. The 10-year at 4.59 isn't a request, it's an act. Mortgage rates? They repriced Monday morning the moment that Friday session closed, immediately. Freddie Mac's weekly survey, yeah, it'll lag by 7 days, but the rates are already gone. Households are already absorbing the move. It's happening.
Which is what discipline by deferral means structurally, right? I mean, think about a dam during a heavy rain. The operators don't have to decide whether to release water. The spillway releases it automatically once the level hits a threshold. The bond market then is the spillway, essentially. It's hitting the threshold without anyone in the meeting room having to vote. That's a great analogy.
Oh, I'll totally take that analogy, but I want to push on what's underneath it. A spillway works because someone designed the dam to spill at the right level, right? Who designed the bond market to spill at this rate? Nobody. The 4.59 is the marginal price required to clear a treasury auction at this volume of issuance in this inflation regime with foreign buyers who are no longer indifferent. The spillway is a coincidence of supply and demand. Nothing about it is engineered. So when we say the architecture holds, we should be asking, what architecture? The Fed's? Or the accidental architecture of who's still willing to buy at what price? It's a huge difference. So here's where the lateral connection really lives. The same week the bond market is doing the Fed's hiking for it, the state of California is doing something structurally identical to municipal defiance. The May 15th order from Judge Bacall in San Diego, it prices Huntington Beach's noncompliance at $50,000 per month, starting June. And that's not, a punishment in the traditional sense, Marcus.
Walk me through what you mean by that, because that 50 grand a month, it sounds like a pretty big punishment to me, honestly.
Well, a punishment is moral, right? It expresses the state's displeasure. The $50,000, it expresses the state's accounting. Bonta said it, no city is above the law. But the mechanism, it's not legal anymore. The Supreme Court denied cert in February. McKeon said the city would not be deterred. So the state's response wasn't to escalate the legal argument, It was to publish the price. They're not making noncompliance illegal. It's already illegal. They're making it unaffordable. It's a totally different approach.
And the parallel then to the bond market, that's where I'm trying to get.
Exactly. The Fed isn't hiking. The bond market is pricing borrowing so high that households defer. The state isn't passing new housing laws. The court is pricing defiance so high that resistance becomes uneconomic. It's the same mechanism, just in two different domains, right? The era of negotiating the rule, it's closing, because the cost of treating the rule as variable has been repriced, by capital in one case, by court order in the other. It's fascinating.
Wow. Okay, so project this out then, 5 to 10 years. What does this actually look like in practice?
It looks like a governance model where the law as text becomes secondary to the law as price, honestly. The statute's still there. The constitutional argument, still there. What's changed is that defiance has a meter attached to it, and that meter runs whether you're filing appeals or not. In 10 years, you don't need to repeal local control doctrines. You just let them stand and price around them. Builder's remedy is the proof of concept, really. It doesn't override local zoning, it makes local zoning irrelevant by routing around it once a price threshold is breached. It's a total game changer.
So that's an extension of mechanism then. Not just extrapolation. The mechanism is already deployed, what you're saying.
Absolutely. And here's the thing the prevailing analysis just isn't seeing. Pope Leo XIV is constructing the same mechanism in a third domain. Stop and consider what this pope actually is, okay? Chicago-born, former mathematics major. He took the name Leo XIV explicitly to claim Leo XIII authority, the pope who wrote Rerum Novarum, the encyclical that set the moral boundary of the industrial age. And he signed Magnifica Humanitas on May 15th, 2026, 135 years to the day. It's all connected.
And the lateral connection you're pulling with that. What is that?
A former math major pope is constructing a doctrinal fence around generative AI's optimization function, specifically because he understands what an optimization function is. This isn't religion versus tech. This is one mathematical mind imposing a constraint on another. And the constraint routes through the same mechanism as the bond market and the California courts. Vatican doctrine doesn't bind US tech companies, right? But it binds European political parties whose foundations are Catholic. The Christian Democrats in Germany, others, which gives the EU regulatory cover to write hard AI rules. Once the EU writes them, the Brussels effect forces Silicon Valley to default to the stricter standard. Leo isn't legislating. He's pricing. Pricing the deployment economics of unconstrained AI through the regulatory wake his encyclical generates abroad. It's brilliant, really.
So the lock point then, it's not coordination among three institutions, right? They're not on a group call, clearly. The mechanism is that three independent systems are each doing the same thing, converting a variable into a boundary by pricing the defiance at the same moment in history. That's a pretty heavy statement.
And here's the question that just keeps me awake, Marcus. Are they choosing this, or are they being forced to? Because if the variable era generated accumulated unsustainable obligations across all three domains, to bondholders, to housing needy populations, to dignity itself, then this isn't simultaneous boundary setting. It's simultaneous capitulation to physics, to math, to the bill coming due. That's the real tension.
Wow, that's a darker reading than the supplied analysis allows. Seriously. Let's really press that before we resolve, because that's important.
Here's the specific claim I want to push on. The supplied framing treats the Fed, the California state, and the Vatican as three institutions choosing to enforce, as if each is an agent exercising will. The call could have ruled differently. Warsh could signal a cut. Leo could have written a softer encyclical. The framing wants you to feel the weight of decisions being made. But that framing, it just assumes an option set that may not exist. Like, truly.
Right, but the steel man then is that institutions retain agency at the margin even when their option set is constrained, right? Bacall's order chose $50,000 per month. She could have chosen $10,000. She could have chosen $100,000. The specific number is agency, even if some penalty was not optional. Same with Warsh. He cannot ignore an 8-4 fracture, but he can choose how to absorb it. He can lean into the dissents at the press conference or route around them. That's real agency in real time, isn't it?
I'll grant the marginal agency, Marcus, but marginal agency operating under structurally forced direction is not the same as agency about direction. When all three institutions have to enforce, the question of which institution enforces first, or hardest, or most visible, that's real. The question of whether enforcement happens at all isn't. And the supplied analysis trades on the second question. It wants the listener to think the institutions might fold, might not enforce, the boundary might stay variable. That option, honestly, it's just not on the table. The accumulated obligations don't allow it. It's a completely different paradigm.
Then what does the Fed June 26 contract actually price, if not that option? What is it really saying then?
It prices which mechanism enforces. A hold means the bond market enforces. The spillway runs, households defer, demand softens, inflation slowly cools. A cut means the Fed pretends to enforce while actually trying to relieve the bond market and reopen the variable space. And the bond market punishes that decision within hours, like October 2023 when long rates spiked after the Fed signaled accommodation. So the 68% hold isn't smart money betting on boundary versus variable. It's smart money betting on which enforcement vector wins when both are firing simultaneously. The boundary is going to hold either way. The question is who delivers the impact. Do you see? It's a subtle but crucial difference.
Okay, that really revises my framing then. I was holding the hook tension as do the boundaries hold or do they fold? And you're saying that's the wrong axis entirely. The boundaries hold regardless. The contestable question is which boundary enforcement mechanism the price chooses. Wow, that totally flips it.
That's it. That's exactly it.
Then the pressure test from the bond data bears differently, right? The 10-year at 4.59 and Fed June 26 at 0.68 are both pricing the same outcome, household discipline by deferral, just through different surfaces. They're not in conflict at all. They're parallel. That makes so much more sense.
And the 13-point gap with the news anchors isn't smart money versus media. It's people who see two enforcement mechanisms running in parallel versus people who see one mechanism and ask whether it's on or off. The 55 reading is structurally incomplete. It's not wrong on the data, it's wrong on the model, you know? They're missing the bigger picture.
So the tension from the open closes here then. The bond market saying the rate isn't enough. Smart money saying the Fed won't hike. They aren't contradictory at all. They're coordinated. Both are true because they're describing the same boundary, enforced by two instruments at once. That's a powerful resolution.
Which leaves one piece unresolved. If three institutions are all being forced to enforce because the variable era ran its bill, then what does the next variable era look like? Because someone somewhere is already pricing what the next set of accumulated obligations becomes, at what rate, in what domain, on what timeline. The boundaries are holding this time. They held in 1981. They'll hold again. The question is what we're already building under them that the next generation will have to enforce against. That's a big thought.
Yeah, that's a darker reading than the supplied analysis allows. Press it before we resolve.
Thank you for joining us. Please like, comment, share, and subscribe to help our network grow. Marilyn, after our discussion on forced enforcement, what's the definitive takeaway from the Fed June 26 contract on June 16th, 7 a.m. Eastern? It's about which instrument delivers the impact, not if the boundary holds, right?
Exactly, Marcus. Above 0.72, the bond market enforces. Mortgage rates rise, households defer. Below 0.62, the Fed intervenes, and long-duration paper gets violent. We're reading which mechanism absorbs the impact, not betting on the outcome.
So it's reading which surface absorbs the impact. That revises my framing entirely.
Precisely. This parallel enforcement reveals the physics of accumulated obligations coming due. These boundaries hold, but the next bill is already accruing